Raina Fletcher didn't expect her Monday to start with a dead phone and a stranger staring at a blank screen like it had personally betrayed him. The tiny café on the corner of Pine and Ninth was almost empty except for the soft chatter of a couple in the back and the constant hiss of the espresso machine. Raina had come to sketch and sip her latte in peace, but her attention kept drifting to the guy at the next table, frantically patting down his coat and checking under napkins like he expected a charger to magically appear. She hesitated, then turned in her seat. "You need an iPhone charger?" He looked up, startled, then smiled. "Yeah. I left mine in my car." "Which is?" "Not exactly close." "Here," she said, unplugging hers from the wall and holding it out. "I'm not using it." "You're a lifesaver." He took it with both hands, like it was some sacred artifact. "I'll just borrow it for a few minutes. I'll make it up to you." "You don't have to," Raina said with a small laugh. "It's just a charger." But the man didn't look like he was used to people handing him things with no strings attached. He was dressed simply plain navy sweater, dark jeans, but there was something polished about him. His posture, his voice, his watch looked like it cost more than her rent, but he wasn't flashy. Just out of place. She went back to her sketchbook, trying not to watch him too obviously. But it was hard to ignore the way he kept glancing at her, like he wasn't sure if he should say something else. "Do you come here often?" he finally asked. Raina looked up, raising an eyebrow. "Is that your best line?" He laughed warm and low. "I deserve that. I meant it's a nice spot. Quiet. Good coffee." "Yeah," she said, softening. "I like it. It's kind of my escape. The real world's too loud." He leaned back in his chair. "Tell me about it." They talked for almost an hour. About everything and nothing. Raina found out his name was Sebastian Reed and he was in tech, whatever that meant. He asked about her sketches and she told him she was a freelance illustrator who was currently broke, overworked, and addicted to caffeine. He listened like every word mattered, even though she was sure she was rambling. Eventually, he unplugged the phone and handed her charger back. "Thank you, seriously. You saved me." She waved him off. "It's just a charger." "No," he said, standing. "It's not." Then he left a $20 bill on the table next to her half-finished coffee and walked out. 2 days later, Raina returned to the cafe and found a small white envelope taped to the chair she'd sat in. Inside was a note. "In case your phone dies next time. Sebastian." And a brand new charger. Still in the box. Her heart did a weird little skip. It became a rhythm. She'd show up to sketch. Some days, he'd be there already, sipping his coffee and pretending not to look for her. Other days, he'd arrive after her, casually dropping into the chair across from hers like it was the most natural thing in the world. They never made plans, but he was always there, and slowly she started looking forward to it. He never talked much about work, said it was boring. Meetings, numbers, code. She didn't push. Honestly, she liked that he didn't brag. Most guys she met on dating apps couldn't shut up about their job titles or gym routines. Sebastian just wanted to know what her favorite movie was, what song always made her cry, what her dream project would be if bills didn't exist. Once, after she admitted she hadn't been to a fancy restaurant in over a year, he looked at her with that quiet intensity and said, "Let me take you somewhere." She laughed. "That sounds suspiciously like a date." He shrugged. "Maybe it is." Still, she said no. Too fast. Too soon. What were they even doing? But the next day, he brought her favorite pastry without asking, and she started to think maybe. Maybe she was falling for a guy she barely knew. It was raining hard the afternoon she realized he was gone. He didn't show up for their usual 3 p.m. coffee. Raina waited until 5, then 6. Ordered 2 lattes just in case. Nothing. No call. No note. No Sebastian. She didn't see him the next day either. Or the one after that. By Saturday, she convinced herself she'd imagined it all. The connection. The sparks. The way he looked at her like she was the only person in the room. Maybe he got bored. Maybe he had a girlfriend and got caught. Maybe he was never real to begin with. But then on Sunday, she opened her apartment door to find a man in a suit standing in the hall. "Miss Fletcher?" he asked. She blinked. "Yes." He handed her a cream envelope and nodded once. "From Mr. Reed." Then he turned and left. Her fingers trembled as she opened it. "Sorry for disappearing. I had to leave town on business. But I should have told you. Please come to the address below." Tonight. 7 p.m. I owe you a real explanation. Sebastian. Below was an address in the Upper East Side. Raina almost laughed. It had to be a mistake. She lived in a studio the size of a shoebox. People like her didn't get invited to places like that. But still, she went. The doorman gave her a polite nod and buzzed her up. She stepped into the penthouse and froze. It was huge. Marble floors, floor-to-ceiling windows, a view of the city that made her stomach drop. A grand piano sat in the corner. A modern fireplace crackled quietly. And there, standing in front of the window in a black suit that fit him a little too perfectly, was Sebastian. He turned when he heard her. "You came. What is this?" she asked, stepping inside slowly. "You live here?" He nodded. "Yeah." She stared at him. "You said you were in tech." "I am." "How in tech, Sebastian?" He hesitated. "Then, I started a company when I was 20. Sold it. Started another. I own several now." Her breath caught. "You're a billionaire." He stepped closer. "I didn't want that to matter." "You lied." "I didn't." His voice was soft. "I just didn't tell you. I liked being invisible with you. I liked that you didn't care what I had." She looked at the room around her. At him. "I didn't expect to fall for you," he said. "But I did." Her heart pounded. "You barely know me. I know enough to know I want more. You disappeared. I made a mistake. I'm trying to fix it." He reached into his pocket and pulled out something small. It was her charger. The one she'd lent him that first day. "I kept it," he said. "Stupid, I know. But it reminded me of you." Raina felt her throat tighten. She didn't know what to say. So he stepped back, giving her space. "You don't have to decide anything tonight. I just needed you to know the truth." She looked at him for a long moment. At the man who sat in a coffee shop week after week, listening to her talk about art and life and dreams. Who never once treated her like she was less than him. Who brought her pastries and remembered her favorite songs. She walked up to him, took the charger from his hand and smiled. "You still owe me dinner." He grinned. "I can do that." And just like that, the air between them shifted. Something had started and it wasn't ending anytime soon. Raina hadn't expected dinner to be delivered on bone-white porcelain dishes by a private chef in a penthouse kitchen that gleamed like something out of a design magazine. She sat at the marble island, trying not to look out of place in her faded denim jacket and worn boots. Sebastian had changed into a dark cashmere pullover, sleeves pushed casually to his elbows, and he moved through the kitchen with the ease of someone who didn't often cook but wasn't helpless either. He set a glass of wine in front of her. "This one's from a vineyard in Tuscany. I bought it last year. Thought you'd like it." She swirled the glass, watching how it caught the light before lifting it to her lips. "You own vineyards now?" "Not officially," he said. "But I fund a few. Helps keep my CFO nervous." She laughed, the sound loosening something tight in her chest. "So this is your real life?" she asked, gesturing around them. "Penthouses. Private chefs. Wine that probably costs more than my rent." He leaned on the counter across from her, his expression unreadable. "It's part of it. But it's not the part one think about when I wake up." She tilted her head. "And what do you think about?" He studied her for a moment. "Lately? You." Her cheeks warmed. "You barely know me." "I knew you'd say that," he said, smiling just slightly. "But I know enough. I know you draw when you're anxious. I know you hate the sound of digital alarms but love thunderstorms. I know you're trying to make something beautiful in a world that doesn't always pay for beauty." Raina blinked, unsure how to respond. Her fingers curled around the stem of her glass. Sebastian didn't push. He turned to slice into the perfectly cooked salmon the chef had plated earlier, placing a generous portion onto her plate with practiced care. "Eat," he said gently. "You'll think better on a full stomach." They ate in companionable silence for a few minutes, the only sound the distant city hum outside the windows. Then Raina set her fork down and looked at him carefully. "So what happens now?" He glanced up. "What do you want to happen?" "That's not fair," she said softly. "You had weeks to figure out who I was. I'm still catching up." He nodded, his jaw tightening. "That's fair." She hesitated. "Are you always like this?" "With women, I mean." Casual cafe conversations, spontaneous gifts, mysterious notes delivered by men in suits. "No," he said without hesitation. "I don't let people in easily. Especially not women." She frowned. "But you let me in." He looked at her, something vulnerable flickering beneath the confidence. "You didn't ask for anything. You didn't want anything from me. I didn't know you had anything to give." "Exactly." They sat in silence again, this time heavier. Raina felt the weight of the moment settle between them. He wasn't just rich. He was guarded. He had built something massive and hidden behind it like a fortress. And somehow she'd slipped past the gate. After dinner, he offered her a tour. She followed him through a sleek hallway lined with art, some clearly original, others looking like they belonged in a museum. The master bedroom was enormous, the walk-in closet the size of her apartment. But it was the room at the end of the hall that made her stop. He opened the door to reveal a space lined with low shelves filled with hardbound sketchbooks and wooden boxes of graphite and charcoal. A drafting table stood near the window, angled perfectly toward the skyline. "This was supposed to be for a designer I hired," he said. "She quit 2 weeks in. Said the project didn't need her anymore." Raina stepped inside, fingers drifting over the edge of the table. "It's beautiful. It's yours." She turned sharply. "What?" "I had it redone. After I met you," he said, his voice steady. "I didn't know why at the time. I just knew I wanted to make space for you. Somewhere you could create without worrying about bills or clients or deadlines." Her throat tightened. "Sebastian." "I'm not trying to buy you," he said quickly. I've spent years building things. For other people. For investors. For the press. This is the first thing I've built just because I wanted someone to feel safe." She stood there, overwhelmed, unsure whether to run or kiss him. Eventually, she said, "I should go." He didn't try to stop her, just walked her to the elevator and pressed the button. As the doors opened, he looked at her. "Will you come back?" Raina hesitated. "I don't know, but I'll think about it." He nodded. "That's all I can ask." She stepped inside and the doors closed between them. The next day, she woke to find a package waiting outside her door. No note, no label, but inside was a brand new set of Prismacolor pencils, the full range, plus a leather-bound sketchbook with her initials embossed in gold. She stared at it for a long time before setting it carefully on her table. That afternoon, her phone rang. A number she didn't recognize. Raina Fletcher, asked a crisp female voice on the other end. "I'm calling on behalf of the Bellamy Foundation. You've been nominated for our Artist in Residence program." Her breath caught. "I didn't apply for anything. There was a private recommendation," the woman said. "Your work was reviewed and approved. A stipend, studio space, and full creative freedom. All expenses covered." Raina sat down slowly. "Who recommended me?" "I'm not at liberty to say." But she already knew. She hung up and stared at the wall. Sebastian Reed wasn't just wealthy. He was dangerous. He could rearrange her life with a single phone call. And yet he hadn't demanded anything in return. That night, she walked back into the cafe where it all began. She ordered her usual, sat at her usual table, and waited. He walked in 20 minutes later, carrying a coffee for her without speaking. He sat across from her like no time had passed. She looked at him evenly. "You didn't ask me." His brow furrowed. "Ask what?" "If I wanted help." He looked down. "No, I didn't." "Why?" "Because I didn't think you'd take it." She considered that. "You're right. I wouldn't have." "So," he said carefully, "are you angry?" "I don't know yet." He leaned forward. "Then let me earn your forgiveness. Not with gifts. Not with favors. Just time." She studied him. The man who never boasted. Who listened. Who waited. "You get one chance," she said. "No more secrets. No more disappearing." He nodded slowly. "I can promise that. And no more surprise nominations either." He smiled faintly. "I'll try to restrain myself." They sat there in the glow of the cafe lights, the hum of the espresso machine in the background, the world pressing in just beyond the glass. Something between them had shifted again. But this time it felt like the beginning of something real. The studio space Sebastian created for her remained untouched for 3 days. Raina avoided it like it was radioactive. She told herself she needed time to think, to regain some control over a situation that had spun out of her hands the moment she'd handed him that charger. But on the 4th morning, she stood at the threshold of the room, barefoot, coffee in hand, staring at the blank sketchbook resting on the table. A beam of sunlight spilled across the floor, catching the edge of the embossed cover with a gold shimmer that made her stomach tighten. She sat down slowly, opened it to the first page, and began to draw. Her hand moved on instinct. No reference. No planning. Just emotion. She drew the café's corner table. The soft fold of Sebastian's sleeve when he leaned on his elbow. The way his eyes always found hers a split second before he smiled. She didn't stop for hours. By the time she looked up, her coffee had gone cold and the light had shifted across the room. That evening, Sebastian called not to ask for anything but to invite her to an art exhibit. Private viewing. Limited guest list. No press, no photographers. Just a collection of abstract pieces in a converted warehouse in Soho. Raina hesitated but said yes. He picked her up in a car so sleek she couldn't identify the make. The driver didn't speak and the interior smelled faintly of leather and bergamot. Sebastian wore a tailored charcoal coat and held the door open for her as if they were stepping into an old film. Inside the gallery, the space was dimly lit by hanging Edison bulbs, shadows stretching across polished concrete floors. Curators moved in silence, nodding politely. Waiters carried trays of champagne flutes and pale hors d'oeuvres. Sebastian didn't guide her, he let her walk where she pleased. She stopped in front of a towering canvas drenched in navy and crimson, thick brush strokes layered like emotion trapped beneath skin. "I don't know what it's trying to say," she said, tilting her head. "Maybe it's not trying to say anything," he replied beside her. "Maybe it just wants to be felt." She glanced at him. "Do you ever feel like that?" He didn't answer right away. "I've spent years making things that needed to be understood. Products. Algorithms. Systems. This," he nodded at the painting, "this is harder. You can't control what someone sees. I think that's what scares me about showing my work." Sebastian turned toward her fully. "Then don't show it. Until you're ready. Not because someone paid for a ticket." Raina exhaled slowly. "You make it sound simple." He studied her carefully. "It isn't. But it can be honest." Later, as they stepped outside, the city air had cooled. A breeze swept her curls across her cheek. She tucked them behind her ear, and Sebastian reached out, brushing his fingers just beneath her jaw. She didn't move. "I haven't stopped thinking about you," he said quietly. "You barely let me catch my breath," she answered. He lowered his hand. "I can wait, but I won't pretend I don't want more." Raina's heart thudded, but she didn't look away. "Then don't pretend. Just don't rush me." The ride back to her apartment was quiet. Not uncomfortable, just full. At her building, he didn't get out. She lingered at the curb, half turned toward him in the back seat. "Thank you for tonight," she said. "I should be thanking you," he murmured. "You made it something I'll remember." She stepped out before the ache in her chest could form into words. The next few days passed in a blur of commissions, emails, and long hours in the studio. Raina didn't hear from him, but she didn't doubt he was thinking of her. She could feel it in the way her phone buzzed with messages from galleries she hadn't dared approach, from clients who suddenly found her portfolio. On Thursday, she received an invitation to a benefit gala, her name engraved in clean serif lettering. No +1. No explanation. Just an address, a time, and a simple line at the bottom, "Formal attire required." Her stomach dropped. She hadn't seen Sebastian in days, but she knew this was him. She almost didn't go. But that night, she stood in front of her mirror wearing a black gown borrowed from her friend Eliza, a stylist who owed her a favor. Her hair was twisted up, loose tendrils framing her face in soft waves. She wore no jewelry except for a pair of delicate silver earrings she'd bought at a flea market last year. The car was waiting downstairs. The gala was held at the Waldorf. The ballroom glowed gold and ivory, chandeliers glittering overhead. Waiters in white gloves moved like dancers, and the air buzzed with the kind of conversations she'd only ever overheard from the sidewalk. She spotted Sebastian instantly. He stood near the grand staircase, speaking to a man in a navy tuxedo. His posture relaxed, but his eyes flicked toward the entry the moment she arrived. His gaze locked on hers, and the rest of the room fell away. He excused himself without finishing his sentence and crossed the marble floor with unhurried confidence. "You're here," he said. "You invited me. I didn't know if you'd come." "Neither did I." He offered his arm. She took it. They didn't speak as they joined the crowd, but his hand never left the small of her back. It wasn't possessive, just grounding, like he was reminding her she wasn't alone. At dinner, they were seated at a round table with venture capitalists, philanthropists, and one woman who owned a lion sanctuary in South Africa. Raina smiled politely, made small talk, and quietly marveled at how easily Sebastian navigated the room. He knew everyone's name, remembered details, listened well. But when the conversation shifted to real estate investments and offshore holdings, she leaned close and whispered, "You owe me a chocolate croissant and a couch with springs." He laughed, low and warm. "I'll make that happen." After dessert, the music swelled and couples began to drift onto the dance floor. Sebastian held out his hand. She hesitated. "I haven't danced since high school." "Neither have I." They moved slowly, cautiously at first, then more easily as the rhythm settled between them. He held her close, but not tightly. His cheek hovered near hers, the scent of cedar and clean linen wrapping around her like a memory she hadn't lived yet. "You fit here," he said suddenly. She pulled back slightly to look at him. "What? You belong here." "Even if you think you don't." "I don't," she said honestly. "Not yet." He nodded. "But you will." She didn't answer, just rested her head against his shoulder, letting herself exist in the moment. When the night ended, he didn't follow her home. He didn't ask for anything. He just walked her to the car, brushed a kiss against her temple, and said, "I'll see you soon." The next morning, Raina returned to her studio and opened her sketchbook to a fresh page. This time she drew herself. Not as she was, but as she was becoming. It was the sound of his voice behind her, low and steady, that made her pause mid-stroke. Raina had been working late in the studio. Sebastian had given her a charcoal sketch of a dancer half-finished beneath her fingertips when he appeared in the doorway. His jacket was slung over his shoulder, shirt sleeves rolled up just past his elbows, and a faint shadow lined his jaw like he hadn't slept much. "You left your door open," he said, stepping inside. "I figured that was either an invitation or a very trusting mistake." She dropped the charcoal stick onto the table. "Depends on what you're here for." He didn't answer at first. Just looked at her. Really looked at her, in the way that made her feel like her pulse was louder than the city traffic humming outside the windows. "I'm here because I need to know where we stand." She leaned back against the stool, arms crossed loosely. "You've been quiet." "I didn't want to push," he replied. "After the gala, I thought maybe you needed space." "I did," she admitted. "But not forever." He walked further in, slowly, as if he were afraid of crossing a line she hadn't drawn. "I've been thinking about something. And I want you to hear it before I lose my nerve." "That's new," she teased, the corner of her mouth twitching. "You nervous?" "It happens more than I let on," he said with a faint smile. "Especially around you." She blinked, not expecting that kind of honesty. "Okay. I'm listening." "I have a place in Montauk," he said. "It's not a mansion, not a palace. Just a quiet house near the cliffs with space to breathe. I go there when I need to remember what matters." She furrowed her brow. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I want you to come with me this weekend. No parties. No suits. No assumptions. Just quiet. Just us." She stared at him, surprised at the simplicity of the offer. "What do you think that's going to solve?" "Nothing," he said quickly. "I'm not trying to solve us. I just want time. Real time. Not stolen hours between your commissions and my meetings. I want to see what we are when the noise stops." Raina turned toward the sketch, her fingers brushing a curl of charcoal dust from the paper. "And if what we are can't survive the quiet, then at least we'll know," he said. "But I don't think that's what we'll find." She looked at him then, and something in his expression made her answer without overthinking. "All right, I'll come." Montauk was wind and light and the kind of silence that made her chest expand for the first time in weeks. The house was perched just above the shore, with wide windows and pale wood floors, a worn deck that led to a path disappearing into the dunes. It wasn't showy. It wasn't designed to impress. It felt lived in. Safe. She woke the first morning wrapped in a blanket, curled on the couch with a mug of tea balanced on the windowsill. Sebastian was in the kitchen, barefoot, cracking eggs into a bowl like it was something he did every Saturday. "You cook?" she asked, half surprised. "Only here," he said. "Something about this kitchen makes me feel like a functioning human." She laughed. "You mean you're not always a high-functioning android?" "Don't tell my board," he said, sliding a plate toward her. "They think I run on espresso and spreadsheets." They spent the day walking the cliffs, not saying much. She asked about his childhood for the first time, and he told her bits and pieces: a mother who worked 2 jobs, a father who disappeared before his 6th birthday, a worn-out laptop that changed everything at 13. She didn't interrupt. Just listened. And when he tripped over something vulnerable, she kept her eyes forward so he didn't have to see her reaction. That night, they built a fire on the beach with driftwood and old newspapers. She tucked her knees under her chin and stared at the flames. "Why me?" she asked softly. "You could have anyone. Literally anyone. Women who know how to walk in heels without tripping. Women who don't flinch when they see their bank balance." He turned toward her, face lit orange in the firelight. "Because you didn't care who I was. You just saw me. But I didn't, not really. You saw the best part of me," he said. "The part one forget exists when I'm buried in meetings and acquisitions and quarterly projections. You reminded me I'm more than what I built." She swallowed, her throat tight. "And you," he added, quieter now, "you're the most alive person I've ever met. You feel everything. You turn it into something." "That's rare." She looked at him, the fire crackling between them. "I don't know how to do this." "Me neither," he said. "But I want to try." She didn't kiss him that night. They sat there until the embers dimmed and the stars came out. And somehow that was enough. On Sunday, just before they packed to leave, he handed her a worn envelope with a soft crease down the middle. "What's this?" "I found it last week. In my desk. It's the receipt from the café. The day we met." She opened it slowly. A single line, latte, charger rental, joking, $20. On the back, in his handwriting, he'd scrawled, "You changed everything." Her hands trembled just slightly. He looked at her, eyes steady. "I don't want to go back to pretending this is casual. It's not. Not for me." She folded the receipt and slipped it into her bag. "Then don't pretend." They drove back to the city in silence, but it wasn't heavy. It was full. The next week, Raina received an invitation to showcase her work at a private gallery in Tribeca. No strings. No interference. Just her name, her art, and a quiet note from the curator, a recommendation from someone who believes in you. She stepped into the gallery that night wearing a navy jumpsuit and paint still under her nails. The walls were lined with her sketches. Not the polished commissions. The real ones. The raw ones. The kind she'd never shown anyone until now. Sebastian stood near the corner, watching her. She walked up to him, heart hammering. "You did this," she said. He shook his head. "You did. I just made sure the world saw it." "I don't want your money," she said, voice low. "You don't have it," he replied. "And you never will. Not unless you ask." She exhaled. Then, in a rare moment of certainty, she took his hand. "I don't want your money, but I want you." He didn't speak, just pulled her closer, kissed her like he'd been waiting his whole life to. And for the first time, Raina didn't feel like she was falling. She felt like she'd landed. The gallery lights softened around them. Her sketches told their story on the walls. Not just of a girl who lent a charger to a stranger, but of the woman who found herself in the silence between heartbeats, and the man who didn't try to change her. He simply saw her, and chose her, every day after. The morning sunlight poured through the tall windows of Raina's new studio, casting bold streaks across the hardwood floor. She stood barefoot, coffee cooling on the sill beside her, staring at the canvas in front of her. It wasn't finished, not yet, but it was closer than anything she'd ever done. The brush in her hand trembled, the last few strokes dangling at the edge of her fingertips. Behind her, soft footsteps drew near, and then Sebastian's voice, still rough from sleep, murmured, "You didn't come back to bed." "I couldn't," she said without turning. "It wouldn't leave me alone." He came to stand beside her, close but not touching. "What's it about?" She looked at the painting. It was abstract, but the emotion was unmistakable: movement, peace, and something deeper. "Everything before you," she said. "And then after." Sebastian didn't say anything right away. His gaze moved over the canvas, then to her. "I want to be part of everything after." She set the brush down and finally looked at him. His hair was a little unruly, his t-shirt creased from sleep. He was barefoot too, and yet somehow he still looked like the man who had once walked into her life like a secret waiting to unfold. "Then stay," she said simply. "I'm not going anywhere." That week, she received an offer from a publisher, an art book featuring her sketches, essays, and the story behind her sudden emergence into the gallery world. They wanted full creative control, but she didn't hesitate. "No." Sebastian raised a brow when she told him. "That was fast." "They wanted to rewrite me," she said. "Polish the rough edges. Call you a patron instead of a person." He didn't smile. Instead, He reached across the table and took her hand. You don't need them. If you want to self-publish, I'll help. If you want a different publisher, I'll make calls. Or I'll stay out of it completely. Just say the word. She squeezed his fingers. I'll figure it out. I just needed to hear that I could. She began to notice the changes in small ways. Strangers started recognizing her at exhibits. Her inbox filled with collaborations. A designer asked to use her sketches in a runway collection. An art school requested a guest lecture. Raina handled it all with the same quiet determination that had drawn Sebastian to her in the first place. She didn't let the attention shape her. She shaped it. One evening, as they walked through Central Park just after dusk, the city glittering beyond the trees, she paused by a small footbridge and leaned over the railing. I used to come here when I was broke and overwhelmed, she said. I'd sit right there on that bench and sketch pigeons. You never told me that. There's still a lot I haven't told you. Sebastian came to stand beside her. I want to know it all. Slowly. Every version of you. She turned toward him. Do you ever miss the quiet? Before all this? Sometimes, he admitted. But then I remember I didn't really have quiet back then. Just silence. She nodded, understanding. There's a difference. When they returned to his apartment, the one she now stayed in more often than her own, she found a small package on the kitchen counter. Her name was written in his handwriting. Did you forget my birthday? She asked, teasing. No, just open it. Inside was a single antique key on a silver chain. She held it up, confused. It's to the house in Montauk, he said. It's yours now. I transferred the deed. Her breath caught. Sebastian, I want you to have something that's just for you. No gallery, no press, just space. I don't need. I know. That's why it felt right to give it to you. She stepped toward him, holding the key between them. You terrify me sometimes. Why? Because you keep giving me things I never asked for, and I'm starting to wonder what I could possibly give you. Sebastian reached up, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. You give me peace. And I didn't even know I needed that. They kissed in the kitchen, the city alive beyond the glass. And in that moment, nothing else mattered. Weeks passed. Her gallery show went international. Commissions came in from Paris, Tokyo, Milan. She turned down half of them. She didn't want to chase fame. She wanted to build something lasting. One night, after a gallery dinner where she'd been the guest of honor, they returned home to find the lights in the penthouse dimmed and soft jazz playing from the speakers. A single note sat on the table. She frowned. We didn't leave that. Sebastian picked it up and read it, his brow lifting. What is it? It's from my mother, he said. She's in town. Wants to meet you. Raina blinked. Now? She's waiting downstairs. Panic flickered across her face. I'm in heels. I've been drinking. I can't meet your mother like this. Yes, you can, he said, already smiling. She's going to love you. They went downstairs, and for the first time, Raina saw a piece of Sebastian she'd never known. His mother was small, elegant, with laugh lines at the corners of her eyes and a voice that carried warmth and authority in equal measure. You're the artist, she said after hugging Raina with surprising intensity. My son talks about you like you invented color. Raina laughed nervously, but something in the older woman's gaze settled her. After she left, Sebastian leaned against the elevator doors and exhaled. That went better than I expected. She's wonderful, Raina said. So that's where you get the charm. He tilted his head. Not the money? No, she said, stepping closer. That's all you. It was a few nights later, on the rooftop of the building where they first danced at the gala, that he asked her. The sky stretched wide above them, stars barely visible through the city haze. A private string quartet played in the background, the sound warm and alive. He pulled her close, his hand steady. Do you remember when I told you I wanted to see what we were in the quiet? She nodded. I've seen it, he said, and I want more. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small velvet box. Her breath caught. I knew the moment you handed me that charger, he said quietly, that you were going to change everything, and I fought it. I tried to stay invisible, but you saw me anyway. He opened the box. Inside was a ring, simple, elegant, just like him. I don't want to be invisible anymore. Not to you. Not to the world. I want everyone to know I'm yours. Will you marry me, Raina Fletcher? She didn't cry. She laughed a breathless, radiant, disbelieving sound and threw her arms around him. Yes, she whispered against his ear. Yes, 1,000 times, yes. The rooftop erupted in applause. The string players, the private chef, even the building staff who had helped Sebastian orchestrate the night. But in that moment, there was only him, and her, and the city that had brought them together through a dead phone and a borrowed charger. They married 3 months later, in the Montauk house, barefoot on the cliffs, waves crashing below. No press, no extravagance. Just a circle of people who mattered and the sea air threading through her hair. She wore a dress she designed herself, and he wore the softest smile she'd ever seen. They wrote their own vows. I never believed in fate, she told him, voice steady. But I believe in the moment you looked up from your phone and saw me. I spent my whole life building empires, he said. And then I met you and realized none of it meant anything without someone to build it for. They kissed beneath a sky streaked with color. And for once, the world didn't pull them apart. It knelt at their feet and whispered, you made it. The house in Montauk became their weekend escape. They painted the walls together. She turned the guest room into a second studio. He planted wildflowers because she liked how they looked when they danced in the wind. They didn't need a fairy tale. They had each other, and that was more than enough.